Good evening. I'm Councillor Sayar Raza, the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's now 7 p.m. and so I would like to welcome you all to this evening of the committee. Members of the committee who are here this evening, guests from housing associations active in the borough, other members who are present, as well as council officers who will be assisting members throughout this meeting. In addition, I would like to welcome members of the public and anybody looking at home on YouTube. Today, we have guests helping us address two issues before the committee: the work of housing associations and reducing housing council's impact on climate emergency. We also have received an item on recycling performance and also have two other items, update from scrutiny panel chairs and a review of our draft annual scrutiny report. Without further ado, let's begin. So to agenda item number 1, apologies for absence, declaration of interest and other communications from members. I have received apologies from Councillor Bowring. Is there any other apologies or declarations of interest? Thank you. We move on to item number 2. So this is the minutes. We have before us minutes from the last two meetings on the 7th of March and 11th of April. I wasn't intending to go through each set separately unless members have an issue of accuracy to raise on a particular set of minutes. If so, then please let me know. Otherwise, we would agree the minutes as a collective now. Agreed? Thank you.
Just as a point, Chair.
Yep.
These were really only circulated today, which doesn't give us a good opportunity to get to read these. Can we ask that the officers try to circulate them earlier?
Noted. Yeah, we'll certainly do that and get these a little bit earlier for everyone to watch, but thank you for that. Moving on to agenda item number 3, housing associations. The first substantial item tonight looks at the role of housing associations in Hounslow. The committee have been interested in the role for housing associations for some time. It's worth understanding this a little more. There are 24,000 social housing homes in the borough. 13,000 of these are owned by the council, and the remainder are owned by over 50 different housing associations. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our guests this evening. They represent 5 of the 7 largest housing associations in the borough and are the landlords to over 6,000 households. They are Julian Chung, Executive Director of Homes, and Lucy Grayley, Executive Director of Customer Services at RHP Group. Thank you. Glenn Jones, Regional Director of North London Metropolitan Thames Valley, Anne-Marie Fellon, Managing Director of North West London, and Sarah Macmillan, Head of Lands and Partnerships, North Western London at Peabody. Welcome all, and thank you for your time, for being here. Thank also to Metropolitan Thames Valley, Peabody and Shepherd's Bush Housing Group to providing background material which members of the committee have received in their agenda packs. Mark Field, Chief Customer Officer at Shepherd's Bush Housing Group, was also meant to join us this evening. He's unwell and sends his apologies and some observations on the relationship between council and housing association, which has been shared with the committee. Responding to Mark's observations and without wishing to steer the discussion before it has even begun, I'll welcome the strengthening of the relationships between housing associations and housing council, not least the relationship between housing association and ward councillors. A housing association's tenant is also a ward councillor's constituent, and the more that can be done to help councillors support housing association tenants and vice versa, the better. To return to our housing association guests, our approach this evening will be to have a conversation. We'll pose questions as a committee and would welcome your views. I'll open the questions and then my fellow committee members will, I'm sure, add their voices. Okay, so if we open to the questions. So if I can ask Councillor Foote for the first question, please.
Sorry, Chair, it just seems rather odd to go straight into questions without having heard from the housing associations that we have with us. They might have prepared introductions. I don't know, perhaps they haven't, but we've had written introductions from others. I think those who are here should have the same opportunity.
Simply to say, Councillor Biddulph, a number of guests have provided written material in addition to the material from Shepherd's Bush Housing, which the committee have had a chance to look at. I don't think every group provided content, and if people wouldn't want to set the scene for a few moments, I'm sure that'd be grand as well.
I had thought there were more than that here. I do see that I have read the 2 reports that we've had, plus Shepherd's Bush. But in any case, it would be quite nice just to have a few words from them, wouldn't it, rather than just bowl into questions?
Yes, okay. So yeah, just a brief, please. That'd be great. Thank you. Just a couple of minutes would be fine. Thank you.
So hi, as I'm Julian Chun from RHP. We're one of the organisations that haven't provided any forward information, so apologies for that. Just in terms of RHP as a landlord, so we are essentially the stock transfer from London Borough of Richmond upon Thames, so in the adjoining borough. We own and manage around about 10,000 homes, of which about 7,500 of those are rented, another couple of thousand which are leasehold, and the final sort of 500 or so are within a subsidiary organisation within our group called Co-op Homes. We look after around about 700 homes in this borough, primarily sort of newer build, which have been built in the last 10 years or so. Lucy and I really here just to kind of give our views, really, if you like, and answer any questions that you have about RHP as an organisation, but also happy to share any kind of observations about what's going on in the sector at the same time, which I'm sure the other panel members are happy to do that as well.
Thank you for that. Do you want to go? Yeah, thank you, Anne-Marie.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Fenlon, MD for North West London and Peabody. You've got the presentation that we sent to you, which hopefully had some detail about us as an organisation, but also importantly, our context in the borough here. I think the thing to say for those of you who are slightly puzzled as to where Catalyst may have gone in it all. So Peabody and Catalyst merged last year, but we had a transfer of engagement on the 3rd of April, which essentially means that Catalyst falls away as a subsidiary, gets subsumed into the whole organisation. And the board chose to take the name Peabody rather than anything else. As you can imagine, quite a lot of historical kind of value in that brand and in identity in that name. So we are now new Peabody, as I like to call us, really, but around 1,300 homes in the borough.
Thank you for that, and Glenn, please.
Thank you for inviting us along this evening. My name's Glyn. I'm the Regional Director for Metropolitan Thames Valley, which is a bit of a mouthful. So you'll probably know Thames Valley Housing Association, as they were historically the largest partner, if you like, in Hounslow historically. And they merged with Metropolitan Housing Trust in 2018. So together, we both owned sort of properties in the borough, and we now have just under 1,200 homes in Hounslow, and we still operate out of Premier House in Twickenham. We also have teams working out of Wembley, so those are the two bases that sort of serve the needs of our residents in Hounslow. And I'm sure we'll get into more of the detail through the questions.
Thank you for that, Glenn. Okay, so we'll start with the questions. So if I can ask Councillor Foote to proceed, please. This is a particular interest to one group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'm the councillor representing Hamworth, so RHP will be familiar with the fact that we share. I think the majority of your premises, I think, are in Hamworth because they come from what was the Richmond estate that was built immediately after the war to provide homes for Londoners who had been bombed out in central London during the war. So I get a lot of my problems as casework is coming through that does concern residents that live in your properties. But we have a great deal of difficulty in contacting anybody in your organisation that we can deal with. So, I mean, it would be helpful. I mean, I welcome some of the comments that I've seen where you are, in fact, I think, saying that exactly what I'm asking you to do more in working with the council and councillors in the borough. Because I think certainly with the residents, your tenants, my residents, we've got a lot in common, and that we can be, if we get together, we can help.
So thank you. And we do appreciate that as an organisation, we don't always get things right. And in particular, over the last few years, getting in contact in particular has been a problem for us as an organisation. And it's one of the reasons why we're here today, is that we want to make sure that we're starting to build the links and connecting with councillors, and we see how we can work better in partnership together. So Julian, I'm new in role, been there about a year. Julian, also about a year back in roles. So this is kind of our first wanting to build those links and connections with you. I think certainly in terms of the service that we deliver, there's quite a bit that's happening in RHP at the moment in terms of change, particularly on the repairs front. So very happy to bring councillors up to speed with that at some point. But it's very much about how we can work together, and actually how do we look at what's best for our communities and where we can utilise each other in different ways, recognising where our roles and responsibilities start and stop as well.
Thank you for that. That's great. So I'll move to the next question here. So for myself is what can the local authorities do to hold housing associations to account? So what can we do to hold you account?
I think the starting point is things like this, really, where you call us to account in a scrutiny kind of environment, and I think we're seeing that increasingly. I cover 11 boroughs in the North West London region, and we're seeing that increasingly with other councils as well. I do think actually the style that you're doing this in terms of a conversation is really helpful. I think Councillor Foot's already acknowledged, your residents are our tenants. There's lots of things we have in common. And I think it's actually about a collaborative relationship that we really want to build. Often your first interest in us is when we get it wrong. And what we want to do is kind of convert that and actually work proactively with you and in collaboration around all the sorts of things that your residents and our tenants, they are one and the same, are all experiencing around fuel poverty, cost of living, etc. So whatever we can do to work collaboratively. And also I think there's something around being more effective with our resources if we collaborate. So lots of us have different pots around cost of living, advice services, all sorts of things, and actually being more collaborative as a council and as RPs, and bringing together those skill sets together in a room, whether it be a surgery for our kind of residents in Hounslow, whatever it might be. We've done quite a lot of different things. I think all of that can add to just that more sort of positive proactiveness, rather than actually probably what you've experienced it to date, which is casework and having, as has already been alluded to, having to chase on some things.
Well, thank you for that. Oh, thank you, Doreen, for being here. Oh, bless. Oh, gosh. Glenn, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what Anne-Marie said, I'd say that, clearly when you represent residents with casework, we want to be accountable and respond quickly and fully to concerns that you raise. Obviously, if you're involved in supporting any residents associations, I think that's also a good avenue through which, we can be held to account. We want our residents to be satisfied, and I think finally we are acutely aware that I think the GLA is kind of saying if services are poor with RPs, then we won't be giving you grant monies. So I think in terms of the overall political sort of field out there. We certainly want to guard our reputations and be known for providing good services, and not having people saying, well, don't provide a good service and we might not be giving you any more public money. So there's quite a big incentive on us to actually to deliver good quality services.
Thank you for that, Glenn. It's a little bit of, oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. Councillor Sharma, please. Yeah.
Who do we contact? Who do we contact if we have got casework? Because what I'm finding is that when I'm raising casework to yourselves, I'm getting nothing back, and the residents are getting nothing back. So who do we contact to get a response?
If you know who they are, then I would say contact your local housing manager. So our local housing managers manage about 500 properties, so that they should normally be your first point of contact. Otherwise, you can contact me directly. My email address is on the document. I can give you my card afterwards, so I'm quite happy to receive direct inquiries from members.
Councillor Biddulph, please.
Thank you. Just picking up on that point, but also then to ask another, if I may. That's very useful. I mean, it has been that I play tricks, or at least what I call tricks, and I won't go to the people who residents have heard from because they're getting nowhere. So I do look at the list of directors and I see if I can work out an email address system and go to the top. But often, or as high up as I can get, often it just gets bounced down to the person who wasn't doing anything. And I think that's the real frustration with us, is we get lovely words from someone at the top. You know, you all write really good letters and you set out the overall policy of your organization, but that's not necessarily reflected in the work done lower down the tree. And when you get down there and you get the same answers, the same inaction, it's very frustrating. And picking up on your point, Anne-Marie, we do only hear about the problems. Nobody writes and says they're doing a fantastic job. And we often get the extreme problems where things have been going on for years and nothing's done. So there's one of you has a really good email address, CEO, councillors and MP or whatever it is, which makes us feel at least that it's not just going into a black hole. I think every housing association needs to provide councillors, you know, in every borough, with a direct route, email address and phone number, so that we know that we're getting somewhere where we will have a response.
No, it's a very good point. Thank you for that, Councillor Biddulph. And thank you for that. So, yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah, of course.
So it'd be quite useful as a collective, the associations that work in the area, that will give you a list of who the housing managers are. But in the next instance, then we'll give you our email details so you can contact us direct going forward. And it is, as you know, it's not only a key driver for us in terms of customer services at the moment. I know it's being driven by the white paper, but there is also the challenges that were spoken about just as I was coming in are around our stock and around some of the conditions of our stock and the works that we're going to have to do going forward. I think that's a huge agenda for us, that we need to work in partnership with Hounslow to deliver. So we're quite happy to provide our contact details.
Thank you for that, Doreen. It's just before you did actually come, we talked about sort of the communication side of things and sort of getting in contact with each other. So thank you for that. And we do want to sort of build relationships with all of you. So then if we do have residents and tenants of need, then we can say, right, okay, they need this. Can you sort of deal with it? At least we know we can feed that back to residents as well and constituents. But thank you for that. Councillor Perisotto, yeah.
Thank you. And as great as it will be for us to have your direct contact details, the fact that many of us are having to email at the top for cases that our residents are bringing to us is showing that something has gone wrong. They shouldn't have to be coming to us. So with that in mind, I would like to know, what are you, in the emails that we get are usually about repairs and antisocial behavior. So generally speaking, what is the process for the residents, and what are you doing to improve that if they're having to come to us?
Please.
So just from an RHP perspective, we've had particular problems with our repairs service for the last 18, 24 months. Many explanations, some linked to pandemic, some linked to Brexit, some linked to availability of people to do the work, resources, etc. However, it's not good enough, and we are making changes. So from 1 June, we're entering into a new repair model with a new contractor. So we are, the best way I can describe it, divorcing and remarrying at this moment in time with our providers. That will take 6 to 12 months for it to bed in, if we're going to be realistic in terms of actually delivering change, but we're very confident that the changes we make will go there. That, for us in particular, has driven a huge spike in complaints. So we averaged, prior to the pandemic, around about 5 complaints a month. We're now at over 90. So you can see the difference that's coming in order, and it's replicated across the piece. We've also seen a huge spike in repair cases coming in. So we've seen a doubling in terms of the amount of work we've also got to do, which has impact on how quickly you can mobilize and change things as well. So it's been this horrible storm of events that sat around us. In terms of customers, we're trying to make it clearer and easier to signpost what customers need to do, from whether they email, whether they phone in, and how we manage it, being clearer on our complaints process and how that goes through. But there is that point around, are our complaints responses good enough? How's it managing in a world where, on a consumer basis, there are more complaints just generally in life? So there are a number of things we are doing, and I'm very happy from an RHP perspective to spend more time with councillors to explain that just from our own unique side. And I think there's something for all of us to give you a clearer chain of communication as to who's doing it. From our own perspective, we want to have the view that it doesn't matter who you are, you should get the same quality response. It shouldn't matter whether you're a councillor or a customer, because the customer should be as valued as what it is. And that's what we're trying to change our culture and how we're going. But it is that changing of a tanker to get to that response as well. I don't know if anyone would like to add further to that.
We've recognised for some time, both as legacy organisations before we came together, that we weren't getting it quite right. And as a result, we have reconfigured. So we're 104,000 homes as an organisation. That is very large. And one of the things our customers and residents said to us during that merger consultation was, you're going to be too large, you're going to be too remote. Where are you? One of the reasons for my role, and one of the reasons for the consolidation of kind of local Peabody, as we're calling it, is actually trying to get closer to our customer. I think there has, many of us have been in this sector for a little while, there is often sort of a cycle of service provision. And I think a lot of us went too far the other way through contact centres, remote ways of contacting. And actually, if COVID taught any of us anything, it's actually that human contact and that human experience is absolutely pivotal to actually the human experience of improvement, really, for us. So what we're doing about that is we have reconfigured our neighbourhood sizes, what might be known as patch sizes. Legacy Peabody was around between 800 and 1,200 homes, very big. We have consolidated that down. We've invested, so we've got rid of a tier of management and basically reinvested that in local officers. We call them customer specialists. Actually, our residents probably call them housing officers. You know, and they do that kind of service. So they are out and about. They will be more and more visible. We're in the middle of recruiting. To your point around who those people are. So for this area, we will have 2 or 3 named neighbourhood customer specialists who actually serve and are out and about in Hounslow. So once we have that, we can share that with you. So you have that immediate contact in. So to your point, Councillor Prosotto, actually we can try and nip things in the bud quicker than we do. To Lucy's point, things are escalating and escalating quicker. Obviously, the Ombudsman is very keen and has been, you know, we've got the campaign at the moment around complaints, and that is all good, actually, because it has surfaced an awful lot. What we're hoping to do is actually deal with that and then start afresh with some of our relationships with our customers and our residents in order to not get to that point again. So just speaking on behalf of Peabody, really, but I think it's a general trend. that we're seeing in the sector.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean it's similar at MTVH. So our local housing managers are out on their developments in the States 2 or 3 times a week. So they also have to do what are called non-technical fire checks, so checking fire safety measures around communal blocks. So they do those either weekly or monthly. They also do all viewings and sign-ups of empty properties. So in terms of the workload they have to get through, it kind of forces them not to be behind the desk all the time. So and clearly we also do have a contact centre, so people can phone and say, I want to speak to my local housing manager, but their details will be on local estate notice boards, and hopefully residents will see them in the flesh. Perhaps they haven't historically, but we want them to be visible and accessible.
Councillor Sampson, please.
Just out of interest, what are the patch sizes for your officers for each association, if you know roughly?
We don't do patches in the same way. We're very, in terms of managing our resources, it's more of a centralised patch, but I can give more examples how to best contact. If we are having issues, there's a specific email address which goes to CSC managers, and that's the best way to escalate up, just given our size of organisation.
Going back to Lara's question about, all of us probably have escalation processes for our business. So our customer calls, and they'll get a list of options that they click on the option what they, what the issue is. And then it goes through to the specialist teams, and they log the call, and it goes through that process. And we all, I think, reflect that we've not been as quick on that return as we should have been in the past. But linked to that, and linked to the new ombudsman now, there's sort of KPIs around that now, that in terms of response times, and to be honest, with most of the I sit on G15, as I suspect a lot of the others do, and most of the issues around the information have been around the contact centres and the IT that connects to that, and not all of us have been as successful in using those services as we had hoped. But for A2D, we most recently, our new CEO started, who's been with us for 8 months, and his mantra is definitely customer first and customer safety. And one of his first meetings was with Richard Blakeway, who's the new ombudsman. And it's quite clear that we all have to get better at this, but that escalation process now will have a KPI related to it. So when they're not answered between a specific timescale, that is escalated into the exec's office. And I think a lot of associations, I understand it was quite operational, and it didn't escalate to that secondary process. So now I think you're finding a lot of the businesses, because of not only because of the white paper, but because we all generally want to be better at customer services, though those KPIs will be escalated to a more senior level in the business. And they're looked at monthly now, and I suspect that's the same for everybody.
It's all right, just to go back to Councillor Sampson, just to say, we have an average, which is between 500 and 700, but actually what we're really trying to work on is we're starting with that, but then what we're working on is what we're going to call, what I call dynamic neighbourhoods. So actually really looking at the data and what our customers are telling us about those neighbourhoods, because some actually are relatively quiet, might be street properties, whatever it might be, and actually a housing officer can deal with more and have more homes under their kind of oversight. Whereas you might have a particular area that's a real hotspot for, I think someone mentioned antisocial behaviour earlier, real hotspot, and actually needs that really intense management. And that might mean a patch size, a neighbourhood size of 300 for a period of time. And then we intensely manage that and move forward. We're not there yet, but we are at the point where we're kind of gathering that data and able to hotspot and kind of get a sense. So I think for me, it's not a one size fits all, but it's roughly between 500 and 700, depending on the area.
Yeah, sorry, and just to add to that, in terms of the KPI, so we'll have hotspots, as you've just said, around, sort of projects or sites that where the schemes are. There's lots of calls. There's a high level of calls, and there's an indication to senior staff that needs to be looked at in more detail.
Thank you. Councillor Tack, please.
Thank you, Chair. Half of the question was asked by Laura earlier about the key contacts. If you'll be happy to provide us with the key contacts, and if the initial contact isn't responding, who can we escalate to? Second is, Doreen did mention that they do follow some KPIs. It'll be good for us to know about the SLAs, the response times to resolve the complaints. So if you have those SLAs, if you can share with us, so we will be able to understand better if the complaint has been raised and the resident is coming to us for help, whether it is within the SLAs or it has breached the SLAs and we are in position to escalate it quickly or not.
Councillor Kiani, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask this question specifically to Peabody. I'm just reading your report. You manage 104,000 homes, yeah? And your maintenance issues, responsive repairs were raised by resident in Hounslow in 2022 and 23 is only 2,800. And you got 77% satisfaction rate. Can you tell us how do you get to this 77% satisfaction rate? What is the what do you use? Feedback, and how do you use it?
Yep. So there are two different types of surveys that are used predominantly by us as registered providers. There's the transactional survey, and then there's a perception survey. The transactional survey does what it says on the tin. It's immediately after you've had a transaction with us, and repairs is one of those. So actually most people, a sample of people, but most people will be surveyed after they've had a repair as to the level of satisfaction that they have with that repair. That tends to be a little bit higher than the perception survey, not least because actually people have had the repair done. So they're satisfied with that. The perception survey tends to be slightly lower. That 77% for Hounslow is the transactional survey. So that's for anybody who's had a repair done. So a sample of those 2,800, 77% of them were satisfied. That's actually slightly lower than our transactional survey generally with our contractors. And I think that goes to some of the quality issues similar to RHP that we've been having with our particular contractor in this area. And we're working very closely with them and contract managing them at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you do these surveys? Quarterly, yearly, or 6 monthly?
So the transactional survey is done whenever the repair happens, and that's done on a rolling basis. With the perception survey, it's done on the anniversary of somebody being in residence with us. So every year we take a sample of people, and it's done over 12 months, and it's a rolling perception survey. So we collate that so that we get the right margin of kind of statistical significance, I guess it's called. If you're a statistician, I'm not, but that sort of level. So that's done on a rolling basis. We use an external company to do that. They give us quite a lot in terms of customer insight now, and increasingly actually text analytics. So for us, whilst the stat is really useful, actually what we're finding is more and more useful is the verbatim comments and actually the sentiment that's coming out and how we can actually improve on that. Predominantly it's around, with anything, it's repairs, it's our contact centre, and it's ease of contact. There are three key drivers of dissatisfaction at the moment that we're focusing on.
Councillor Biddulph, please.
Thank you. Jumping around a bit, but it is meant to be a conversation, so that's great, I hope. I hear what you say about sizes and mergers, and Shepherd's Bush, which isn't here today, is merging with Guinness. And somebody used the word cyclical, which I referred to as well in terms of the NHS, which is suddenly going through a let's make things bigger because we can make economies of scale or whatever. And there will be a period when you all decide you've got too big and you've got to get small again. So what are you doing to make sure that the hyper-local aspect, which is what we're interested in, is still a focus despite the fact that you're getting bigger? We're customer satisfaction. I know you've got a new system coming in as from last month, haven't you? In terms of standards, there's a new customer satisfaction process for you since April 2023, tenant satisfaction measures. Rather than have a global percentage, it would be much more useful if we could have a borough percentage, and then within that, how many of the complaints are about repairs, how many are about ASB, how many about, give us a breakdown, because we get the complaints that are always about similar subjects. I always get the same subjects anyway. For that tenant, it's 100% that's gone wrong. For you, it might be a tiny percentage. I think we need to understand the wider context. A global figure of tenant satisfaction isn't enough. So I wonder if you can provide us with more detailed, hyperlocal details, as it were. I've mentioned the size point. I am concerned about that because it does seem to reflect a reduction in the on-the-ground response. And there it isn't speed of response that I'm concerned about. It's about, or at least our residents aren't concerned about, it's how long does it take to get to the end of the problem satisfactorily? Because you can have a very fast response at first level and 7 years later still be plugging away at the same issue. And I would like to know, if possible, I tried to get this information beforehand. Glyn, you mentioned the GLA. I'd like to have a bit more information about the role of the GLA and what you do. Sorry, that's several questions in one go.
Okay, I think the GLA's role is mainly about funding and regeneration and building of new neighbourhoods or regenerating existing neighbourhoods from a more strategic level. You know, deciding where to invest. You know, the sort of public government money which goes, it's the GLA that decides in London where that's invested. So they're very much about, I think, the fabric of neighbourhoods, but they are increasingly, as I said earlier, taking note about which partners they work with in terms of the quality of the services that they provide. It's not just about, well, we'll be able to build 50 more properties for the same money. So, you know, I think that's what the GLA do in a nutshell. I'm sure I've done that.
And then are you all competing with each other for that pot? Are you trying to get in before each other?
Or sometimes the GLA, sometimes it's the local authority takes forward a site as a strategic partner. That they might then do a bid process, you know, and RPs will politely compete against each other with contractor partners sometimes, you know. So yeah. Sorry, going back. We've got a housing management team, separate housing management teams across the you know, west and north London. So the housing management team that looks after Hounslow looks after Ealing, Hounslow, Hillingdon and Slough. So that's their focus. So there's a housing operations manager, and that's Liz Bryan, and she manages 5 local housing managers. And we've also got a tenancy enforcement specialist that deals with serious antisocial behaviour. So their focus is just those 4 boroughs. And of those 4 boroughs, you know, Hounslow does have the largest stock, so 1,200. So it's a key focus for us. And as I said, we operate out of Twickenham and Wembley, so we're not far away. We can get on site reasonably quickly, and we expect the local housing managers to, as I said, to be out on site a lot. So, you know, that is their world. They are part of a much larger organisation. We manage a mere 57,000 compared to my colleague on my left, but you know, it's a big organisation. But you know, their focus is, you know, Hounslow, along with those neighbouring boroughs. So that's, we think, how we can make it work on a local basis.
Thank you, Sarah.
I was just going to add, around the GLA, just around the GLA, they wouldn't fund us unless we're compliant with certain rules and regulations. And there's a tenancy standard, and every year we go through a process where they check and validate certain things around us before we can become strategic partners, which means that we are eligible for funding.
No, thank you.
Thanks.
Sarah, if you want to come in, please.
I did read those standards, and they're very broad brush, aren't they? It's
Well,
very
they've
high
changed-
level.
Yeah, they've changed from April. So the April
I saw,
standards.
yes, the satisfaction ones
the
changed
new
from
ones,
April, yeah.
the new ones have come in, but they'll apply. So that's where the new focus has come from for the GLA.
Yeah. Sarah, if I can actually come in, thank you. Thank you, Biddulph. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on the role of the GLA. I'm within the development department, so we look at the new housing developments, and the GLA are really driving forward the delivery of affordable housing in partnership with the local boroughs. And their role in what we do is making sure that we are delivering the maximum amount of affordable housing that we can on new sites, making sure that affordable housing is in line with, 10 years that they support within the London plan, the planning policy. And as Glenn said, is around regeneration. So they're really ensuring that if we are, especially where we're using GLA grant, and we're looking at regeneration opportunities, for example, that they've obviously brought in a ballot to make sure that the local residents are supportive of new regeneration projects within London. So those are kind of some of the key things that the GLA drive forward when looking at new housing opportunities.
Thank you for that, Sarah. If I can just kind of bring it back.
I think that's one of the things that's been very evident. Cooperation between GLA and the housing associations, and that is starting just now, very recently, starting to filter down to us in the local areas. And I think that's that move between the GLA and the housing associations is a very welcome one.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Sharma, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just obviously you've said that Councillor Bowring is unable to attend this evening, but he did have a very good question that he had put forward. So I'd like to say, if at all possible, with regards to what Councillor Biddulph just said about satisfaction and everything, would you agree to undertake an annual report on complaints that take place within the borough and share that with the council?
Yeah, so if I may, I'll take some of the questions that Councillor Biddulph asked as well, because I think it's all in the round about that local data and local information. We do have some of it already. So things like antisocial behaviour, I've got here a breakdown of the kind of themes and cases in Hounslow. We've got that for complaints as well. So we'll have that various bits of information. We are trying to get better with our data at being able to drill it down. I think the one measure that will be slightly difficult on that actually is the satisfaction, because it gets to such a granular point that actually, you could be looking at 2 or 3 residents that have been surveyed in Hounslow for the perception survey, and that doesn't necessarily give you a feel. So definitely for some information, we could do that. I don't like to volunteer that for all of my fellow RPs, but I'm sure we can each speak for our own. But certainly from our point of view, that's where we're hoping to get to in terms of driving some of the things that we do in Hounslow and other boroughs anyway. So we'll use that data and we'll have it for yourselves if wanted. Quite a lot of our boroughs do ask for data on an annual basis as well.
No, thank you for that. Yep.
And we normally do it as part of the preferred partnership that actually each borough asks us for it when we're signed up to you as a preferred partners. So quite happy to repeat that instead of to councillors as well.
I was just going to come on the back of that, whether there's something we could do with officers, where, because if you've obviously got quite a number of housing associations, you're going to get this in a variety of ways. If it could be combined into one report that we feed into, that might give you the information. That
and thank you for those points. So I think it's not literally giving us all the councillors those complaints. So yes, giving it to Housing Council, they can then dissect it and do whatever they need to do to give us that information. Quite right. But yeah, thank you for that.
Although I think, Chair, we need it association by association or provider by provider. It sounds very good to have a global one, and maybe there is some value in that. But if I haven't got some of you in my ward, then I want to know what's happening in those that I have got.
HP are very much associated with Hamworth Ward, and I don't know what that represents in percentage of their business, but I should imagine it's quite considerable.
Yeah. So I guess all of this information is really valuable information. As you say, the proportions will vary hugely. So in RHP, Hounslow is 10% of our stock. If, as Lucy said, historically we got 5 complaints a month, 1/10 of those, so half a complaint a month, would be proportionately in Hounslow, whereas other organisations, the proportions might be different. I think as soon as you get into kind of very local level data, I think that there'll be a bit of a question mark about the value of it in terms of setting a standard. It's good to know in terms of casework and what have you, but I guess the other question is then what are you going to do with it? So if you, I mean, you know, Richard, if you find that RHP aren't doing particularly well in the Hamworth estate, you know it's us, so you'll come and speak to us. We talked right at the start about holding organisations and cars to account. We've got 2 other big bodies that hold us to account. So first of all, there's our board, so as individual organisations, but secondly, there's the regulator of social housing. We talked about the GLA, but the regulator is the one that, okay, it doesn't restrict our funding, but it does determine how successful we are from a viability and a governance perspective, and soon to be consumer regulations as well. So I think, you know, we are under scrutiny a huge amount, and not least by our customers as well. So I think just getting that balance between I think you mentioned, so it'd be what, 11,000 properties that are across housing association stock within Hounslow, across 50 providers. So I'm probably slightly more of a statistician than Anne-Marie is, but the proportions may not give you the kind of level of insight that you're really after.
No, but you are the biggest ones.
Yeah.
Yep. So within all the little ones, you are the biggest ones. So it's about that perception from you guys, you know, the champions here, to say to other housing associations that, look, follow our lead, so you can have good practice. So it's good to take on board, and of course we'll always work with you. The council will always work with you. I just wanted to bring it a little bit back to our sort of question and the makeup of that. One of the things that you do that I wanted to ask was that a lot of the reports, and of course what's happened in this year for a lot of you, there's an uptake on complaints and repairs and procedures and so on. How confident, or is there a timeline of when these repairs are going to be done? Anyone can answer, yeah.
I'll have a go. I mean, as I said, we've got 1,200, just under 1,200 properties in the borough. You know, just under 800 are rented. So at the moment, we've got 36 damp and mold cases. We've got 2 repairs complaints. So going back to Julian's point, we've got 2 outstanding at the moment. Obviously, some come in, some get closed, but you know, we just need to see what is that total number at the end. You know, is that analysis going to be, you know, worthwhile? And in terms of stock condition, up-to-date stock condition surveys, we've got them for 82% of the stock in Hounslow. We've got 1 disrepair case, like a legal disrepair case. So that gives you kind of a flavour of some of the numbers. I mean, I would say compared to other boroughs, they're probably below average. You know, I think the stock, our stock in Hounslow is more modern than a lot of our other stock. That's mainly because it's from the Thames Valley Housing Association historically, who did grow and develop in the kind of 90s on, especially, you know, and some of the older metropolitan stock is where we have some of the key problems. We're under intense pressure from someone mentioned the Ombudsman earlier. So residents, I would say, now are much more confident and vocal in going through complaints processes, going through to the Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman are obviously, you know, they're very active. They've grown massively in terms of the staffing numbers to cope with these complaints. So you know, we and others have been on the end of some maladministrations from the Ombudsman. Quite often they are about repairs and maintenance. That's the most high level, high volume service that we provide. So whilst we have targets, obviously, for emergency repairs and routine repairs and so on, I think we do need to get better. I think it's some of the more complex disrepair work. Sometimes solicitors may be involved. We need to be better, I think, at managing our complaints processes. So we do have an independent complaints team that will scrutinise what our local teams are doing. So if people complain about a local team, you know, councillor, then it won't be that team that investigate themselves. But I think the learning for the sector is that, you know, we're under much more scrutiny. We need to get better. There are challenges with stock conditions. And it needs more investment than what we have. And it means that, unfortunately, we are getting more disrepair cases, but we need to manage them better. And I think, you know, that is the one thing that we've learned from our complaints, I would say. You know, I think, you know, ASB, we've learned that that's very important to residents, but I think we've got to deal with disrepair better, you know.
I'm just going to follow on with that. So with sort of repairs and upkeep, and I'm sure you all have similar sort of issues and problems. What level of engagement, while it's a Hounslow resident, do you have with Hounslow Council to say that this level of repair we need to do? What mechanism is there?
Sorry, to clarify,
Sure.
to go back to the council when a repair's raised.
So yes, so a Hounslow resident raises a repair, and then of course you take it on, and there could be sort of complications. Is there any feedback or any communication to Hounslow Council?
No, not that I know of at the moment. I mean, one of the issues with how long does it take to do a repair, I think what all housing associations are conscious of, and what they get with no, we need to get better at, is repeat repairs. So when things can go into repair a number of times, the same repair, and it's because we have to look in more detail, more strategically at that operation, and look at the source problem and fix the source problem, and look at it in a much wider context. And that's what we're doing now, and that's what's taking more time to do that. So instead of constantly being on this treadmill of fixing the repair, and then it comes back, is okay, analysing that data a lot better now and saying what is the actual issue with this stock and fixing it. And that may take longer, that may be a bigger problem. And I would suggest going forward, that would be the point at which we would we should and we will contact the local authority and say that there's a bigger issue here. There's an underlying issue that, in terms of, and damp and mould, certain things will do that. You know, we'll highlight that. But there are a number of other things that are highlighting that. And I think that for us, I can honestly say I've been quite shocked by the figures of the multiple times that we've gone back on repairs. And we absolutely need to do something about that. And I think if we do that, then we will fix things better.
So I think the quick answer to your question is only if an environmental health officer gets involved will the council be sort of directly involved, you know.
And you'll wait for that to happen, or?
Well, no, of course not. But that is usually the example when the local authority, not just in Hounslow but across the board, if there's a serious disrepair and it's got to a certain level, then they can step in and they have statutory powers.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, please.
Yeah, I was going to say that we have had a couple of instances recently, actually, where officers have got in contact with us quite proactively, having been out and about and seen some issues on some of our estates, and that's actually been quite helpful to kind of work together with them. There were some issues on an estate with some windows, and we got on top of that. One of your officers spotted one window, we dealt with 10. So, that sort of thing. It was an environmental health officer, but it wasn't quite at the notice stage. So we do try and preempt those. I think I just wanted to add in around kind of the reality around repairs, really. They are inevitably often delivered by contractors, commercial contractors who are looking to make a profit within that. And as a consequence, we become a transactional business for them, and they don't necessarily see the customer at the end of it. And I think that's very much been part of the culture of a lot of our contractors. You will probably have heard horror stories about how they treat residents. I certainly have. I wouldn't want them coming in and talking to my mother like some of them have in the past. So there's a lot more work being done by ourselves in partnership with contractors, that long-term 10-year partnership, that kind of thing. RHP have got a great model that I'm very interested in seeing how that rolls out in terms of kind of something that's a little bit more collaborative, a bit more of a joint venture, so that everybody has ownership in actually being successful, not just with the bottom line of getting the repair done, but the satisfaction of the customers in doing that. So I think there's something in that for me around the work that we need to do and are doing with our contractors on changing that culture. But also, just to say, planned investment. So actually, we can do all the responsive repairs. It's to your point, really, Dorian, as well, around the data of going back and again to the same repair. Actually, there's been a real acknowledgement in our organisation that we need to do more on planned investment. So our budget has been very much focused on looking at the planned investment we need to do in stock condition survey over the next 5 years, so that we can change that ratio of responsive repairs to planned to be more sensible.
Councillor Biddulph, please.
Thank you. And that was the point I was going to make, really. It was about the contract management side of things. And I was going to make the point that Richard's just made, which is you're not alone in that. We have it ourselves. And one of the issues, I think, is that people are too remote from it, or they don't understand contract management. And going back to fix a leak, doing a bodge job, means you'll get a call to go back, fix a leak, do a bodge job, and so it goes on. And it's only when there's a lot of pressure from a third party, perhaps, potentially one of us, saying this has got to stop, that somebody goes up there with a ladder and does a proper job. So that's one of my concerns, is contract management has got to be tightened up, it seems, and in our case as well. I also worry about the role there of housing officers, or whatever they're called, in their feeling positive about doing something about this. Is it another one of those, and is it a chore for them? And what I describe as a merry-go-round. You see an awful lot of movement of housing officers. You can take on a complaint in one block, and a few months later it's a different housing officer. They haven't got the background. It's starting again, and the same thing happens 3 months later and 3 months later. And I don't know what you can do about that housing merry-go-round when presumably people are going from, say, Peabody to A2 Dominion or vice versa, and just hopping around doing a not very good job wherever they go. Don't know what you can do about that.
Well, we don't employ people if they've got a record of not doing very good jobs in previous jobs.
I don't know how you tell though, because if the resident isn't asked, it can just be somebody making a jolly good application and saying, I've handled this, and how do you delve into that?
Yeah. Well, trying to start from the beginning of the points you raised. I mean, MTVH are slightly different in the fact that we do have a direct works organisation. So we have Metworks, so they employ 400 operatives. So we also employ an external contractor. So we have different models. So we are now, looking to adopt sort of a single, more consistent approach. And at the moment in Hounslow, we have our direct works organisation and an external contract. So that's quite an interesting exercise. Clearly, with the DLO, you have more control. They don't need to make a profit. So, we think that we still have issues with them, but we think we have less than with external contractors. It's a competitive jobs market out there. That's all I can say. I'm sure everyone else on this side of the table will tell you the same. And we do invest in our colleagues and want to keep and retain them. Every time we lose people, it just costs us money to advertise and recruit. So we do our best to keep strong, stable teams, and it is common feedback that we get from our customers. So the only thing we can say is we try and minimize kind of reorganizations, for want of a better word, and and if we have good staff, then we want to keep them and hopefully develop and promote them in due course. So I don't think there's a magic wand for that one.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sharma, please.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the repairs, obviously we have tenants, but we also have leaseholders as well. Is it a case of that your contractors that you're having come in, are they making good a repair, or are they actually fixing the repair?
Sorry, Councillor Shah, is that in regard, you mentioned leaseholders, is there a particular slant on that you're thinking
obviously
about? Just
they pay a lot of money to be a leaseholder for repairs to be rectified correctly and thoroughly. So I'm just wondering, with your contractors, is it a case the job that they're doing, is it a case of that they're making good that repair, and there is a possibility that repair is going to break in a few months' time or several months' time, and so then that's another cost to them?
Okay, there's quite a lot in there, but in terms of the repair itself, I think the aim is first time fix, we call it. Actually, you go in, you do the job, you don't need to go back again. And the way in which a lot of our contracts are sort of set up is it's an incentive to just do that, because it's not a price per job, it's a price per property. So the more you have to go back into that property, the more it's costing you, really. So actually, it's in the contractor's interest, we would think, to actually get it right first time. Doesn't always happen, and I think that's probably quite a lot of your caseload is actually some of that, and Dorian's already talked about repeat visits. But I think on that, we are increasing our numbers of surveyors and the number of post inspections they do on repairs, so that actually that quality check that perhaps has slipped slightly, particularly during COVID, that quality check on contractors is coming in more and more. And again, as I talked about with that sort of contract management that we've talked about, actually the quality of the repair as well as the quantity of the repair and the customer feedback and the satisfaction are all factors that are increasingly coming into that contract, and actually the incentive that a contractor might get to improve. On leaseholders, it is a challenge. We have 25,000 leaseholders who are telling us that actually value for money is a huge challenge. They're not impervious to the cost of living crisis. We all know that. So we're looking at different ways in which we can support leaseholders. The majority of leaseholders actually don't get repairs done in their homes. But actually, we're looking at ways in which they could perhaps access our contractors in order to get a better, sort of economies of scale on costs. So we're looking at different ways of supporting our leaseholders. But certainly in terms of anything that they pay for in their service charge, we can't recharge them anything that is below par. It has to be up to the standard, otherwise that's challengeable under their under service charge legislation. So we have to make sure that anything they're invoiced for and anything they pay in their service charge is of a standard. And if it isn't, we bear that cost.
Can I have Councillor Cameron? Thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair. But Councillor Bidu already asked my question, but I will repeat it. What are your views on the tenant satisfaction measures focusing more on qualitative reporting that provides the assurance that the work is being done instead of a numbers approach? Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I think the whole housing sector is broadly welcomed the thrust of the tenant satisfaction measures, and it gives more weight to the perception of tenants and customers. So I think we all agree with that, and I think they're going to make all landlords try and measure things in a consistent single manner, because dare I say it, I think some landlords would adopt certain methods to get higher scores than other people would kind of play by the rules and then get lower scores. So I think there'll be some big changes in what some landlords have published, as their satisfaction rates. So I think some might come down. And I think the other interesting thing, which just alludes to the last question, if you have more than 1,000 shared owners or leaseholders, you have to publish a separate satisfaction figure for that cohort of residents. And again, in terms of what we've learned from complaints and other feedback, is that satisfaction amongst shared owners and leaseholders is well below our general needs tenants. Some of it's to do with, well, is it to do with how we apply service charges? Is it the value for money for service charges? Do they think they're overcharged for communal repairs? There's a number of things in there, but we know that's an issue, and I think TSM measures will just shine a further light on that, But and I think broadly we think they're a good thing,
Councillor Tuck, please.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned about the repairs and satisfaction survey. Do you have inspections post-repair or post-job done? Do you have inspections in place to inspect the work that's been done, or you just measure the success by the satisfaction survey only?
So for fear of giving 4 different answers from 4 different organisations, we probably all do things slightly differently. But I think it's fair to say that to post-inspect all repairs jobs is just not achievable. And certainly our organisation don't do that. But what we will do is we'll do a percentage. It's normally quite a small percentage, so maybe between 5 and 10% of repairs jobs would be post-inspected to make sure that the quality is good, that we're paying for we'll get what we're paying for, and obviously that the customer has been kept informed throughout the process. So I don't know if other organisations similar, but we're sort of between 5 to 10% of all response repairs jobs will be inspected. I imagine it'd be slightly different for some of the planned investment works that both Anne-Marie and Doreen have been talking about. So if we're doing kitchen installs, new window replacements, and so on and so forth, the percentage is probably closer to 100%. So because you're spending, several thousands of pounds in each property, and you want to make sure as an organisation we're getting value for money. But on lots of small jobbing repairs, the percentage will be a lot smaller. I imagine there's a few nods going on.
Yeah, exactly.
So is that 5 to 10% on random basis, or it's scheduled?
Yeah, so again, it probably varies between organisation. Ours is pretty randomised, but it might look at, for example, the more expensive response repairs jobs, or it might be where there's a history of things going wrong on a particular trade. Typically a plumbing issue will get fixed. If it stopped the leak, it stopped the leak. So you probably don't need to post-inspect many of those. If it's a carpentry job, which I don't know, is fixing a loose handrail or a broken stair tread, the health and safety implication for that might be different. So you might have a more focused set of post inspections. And I think, again, speaking from, I came previously from an organisation that a bit like Glyn had a large direct labour organisation. Then you can probably focus in on the quality of the individual trades. So if you know that, Dave the plumber is not as good as Joe the electrician, then you might do a bit more inspection on Dave the plumber. So you can then flex your post inspections accordingly. I'm imagining we're relatively similar.
So this would be sort of random checking. So you'd have a job, or might have hundreds of jobs, and you say, right, okay, 10% of those jobs I'll randomly check. And is that kind of consensual between?
The only thing I'd say is that we're now making an absolute point of post-inspecting all serious damp and mold cases. So I imagine that might be similar across the board. So they are not just, we'll just do 10% of them. We're doing, close to 100% of them now, and that has changed, I would say.
And that has changed probably because they were ones that we'd been in before, in quite a number of cases. So that check afterwards is quite important, actually going back as well and checking with residents. So that has changed most recently.
Thank you for that. A lot of sort of, as you probably gathered, a lot of committee members want to know, when you do have residents and we are doing these work repairs, we're doing the surveys, the complaints, we're doing everything. What information do you give to Houser Council of those residents' repairs or whatever work is being done? Is there any information that comes to us?
Not yet, I don't think, but there will be next week or whenever. But going forward.
So going forward, you'll sort of all agree that you'll share some information, say that, resident X lives here, we've done this work.
So
I think it's a point that was made earlier. It's really about what you want and what you'll do with what we provide, really. So I think we're all happy to be open and transparent, but equally we could overwhelm you with a whole heap of data, and actually one of your officers will end up kind of sifting through it. So I think it's more about perhaps us thinking about what are the issues that perhaps you're hearing about from. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Perhaps a pro forma or some sort of template. You could set up a list of questions and we could all answer the same questions.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I think it's perhaps about some of the trends that you might be seeing, and actually we can perhaps then veer the data that we provide to that, but as a pro forma, so that we're all, I think Glyn made the point earlier about the tenant satisfaction measures. Often you will end up comparing apples and pears because we just do things slightly differently. So actually, just if you're trying to sort of contextualize it and compare one RP to the other, that could be quite difficult if you're just looking at figures. That's all I would say.
I think it's also worth, we wouldn't go down to the granular per person per repair, because the amount of work that would cause for us is totally inefficient. So it's at what level you need it, and whether we can actually break it down by ward. I don't even know if we could get to ward level, but we could certainly do by borough level. I think you've also got to apply on top of that data protection principles. So whilst you might sit there and say you would love that information, there may be information we actually can't share. And that's because, especially on ASB in particular, there's some very strict regulations around what we've got as a sharing agreement with you or not.
No, I get 100%, but thank you. I think definitely, I'm sure as a council, we can certainly do something that can be shared with you guys. And then we can use that information and be kind of broader to the borough-wide or similar to these packs, but maybe one extra detail.
I think when we would want to share stuff with you and you'd be interested is, we've talked, others have talked about planned investment. And I think it's when we are doing options appraisals of blocks or estates and we then want to do something different. And I think that is the time that with members and perhaps the wider local authority, we would want to have a conversation with you. So if if some of our homes border your homes or other land that the council own, then there might be joint regeneration opportunities. If we are got properties next to public land that might need environmental works, it might make sense to do it in some sort of planned program. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there for us to work more closely together. So if you've got plans for a particular area to invest into your housing stock, it might make sense to do it, you know, in conjunction with the local RP that might have stock, you know, adjoining it, you know. So I think that's where we can probably work together more practically, if you like.
That's brilliant. Thank you. We're going to come sort of nearer to the end of this segment, but if I can just ask committee members, is there any other sort of questions or desires or discussions? Councillor Biddulph.
I think I know what the answer to this is going to be, but first of all, do you have any specific contracts with specific local authorities talking about your response times, talking about your client satisfaction lengths of time? And if you have, has it worked? And if you haven't, would it just be would be very difficult. I know ours would be different from Hammersmith and Fulham and so on, but is there anything that can be done to regularize where there are differences, perhaps, where there's slower responses? Ours might be slower than yours, I don't know.
We've attempted it with some local authorities over the years with RPs in the room. It does become quite difficult because it does come down to your definition of particular kind of, you know, so for some of us, our responsive repairs may be 7 days response rate. For others, it might be 10 days, just using that as a blanket example. So actually, we could say we respond in 90% of cases within our SLA, but actually that's 20 days, not 10. Do you see what I mean? So actually, the local authorities where we've attempted it, it hasn't sustained. We might have done it once or twice and then it sort of faded away. I don't know if that's others' experience, but that's certainly mine.
That's very useful. Thank you.
Is there any more from anybody else? Go for it.
I have a question for us rather than
for
the providers, which is we recently were given lists by ward of all our own social housing properties. It would be very useful if we could have a list of all our housing association properties, because I only found out yesterday that I've got another housing association in my ward. It's a good thing because nothing's arisen there, but it would be very useful to know who it is that I've got in my ward, if we could have that as a routine thing for all councillors.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, go on.
Can I just add to that? So you may be able to find out which housing associations operate in your area, but I'm imagining as the council, you probably don't know who owns which individual property, I would imagine. So if I as a housing association went and bought a property in your estate, you wouldn't know that unless I told you. And the council wouldn't know that either if I went and bought it. So I think actually it's probably quite good that you don't know, because it means that hopefully nothing's going wrong. Which
that's what I said. Yeah.
But yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I'm going to pass to now Councillor Foot to summarise the discussion, please.
Right. Thank you. I'll keep this short. I think listening to the general opinion of my colleagues, I think that the way things are moving in conjunction with the GLA, the events that we've discussed and we've heard about, is something to welcome. The directive that the housing associations are moving in. And I thank you for what has been an honest and informative meeting with the information that you've been sharing with us. And I would look forward to continue to improve and hopefully meet again in the future. So I think that I would therefore move that thank you for the housing associations and their input that they have made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Richard. And to that, we would like to thank you all for your contributions, for being here today. So Anne-Marie, Doreen, Glenn, Julian, Luke, and Sarah, thank you so much for being here. You're welcome to stay, of course. We do have other business, or you're more than welcome to, of course, leave. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. Yes, I'm sure. Okay, so agenda item number 4, so climate emergency. We now move to the next item of business, the council work on climate emergency. I'd like to welcome Councillor Dunn, Deputy Leader of Council and Cabinet Member of Climate, Environment and Transport Secretary, Victoria Lawson, Executive Director, Environment, Culture and Customer Services, and Ajit Bansal, Head of Climate Emergency and Environmental Strategy. Thank you all for being here. The Council declares a climate emergency almost 4 years ago. We have an opportunity as a committee to comment on activity and date and future areas of focus. This is a shorter item, so we won't go through the usual process of question discussion, focusing instead on questions and the committee might have. So Councillor Dunn and Victoria, so if I could just ask you to introduce the item, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So you've all received the paper and hopefully had a chance to read through it. It's got a substantial amount of information in there. It just kept getting longer, really. When I know you wanted a short item, but we just, we are doing so much as a borough, which is why it's got so much in there. There is a huge number of projects that contribute towards our work on the climate emergency. So I'm obviously not going to talk through the whole paper. You have seen it. It's in it covers both our work, both on our council's own footprint, carbon footprint. Just a couple of things on that, I suppose, to point out that it's something we take really seriously, to the extent that we did recalculate our carbon footprint. So following that initial work, when we declared the climate emergency and calculated what our carbon footprint would be, or was, sorry, at that time, things have moved on and the methodology has moved on. There are new things to take into account. So when we did that recalculation, specifically taking into account things like scope 3 emissions, then that actually went up. So it's not to say we were using more carbon, but we were calculating it better and taking into account everything that not only that we're using directly, but as part of our supply chains and things. So that's why that went up when we recalculated it. And so when we talk about the reductions that have happened since then from the 2019 baseline, that is that recalculated baseline. And so you'll see we have made a small inroad into that. I should point out that the figures that you've got in front of you are a year out of date now. So that was for the year 21-22. So we're now in the process of calculating what our 22-23 outturn is. We don't have those figures yet, so that will be, I'll be bringing that to Cabinet later in the year in our annual reporting, and of course we'll be very pleased to come back to overview and scrutiny at that point. As I said, I won't go through all the programmes. I'm sure you've read it and we'll have specific things that you want to ask questions on. But just to say, in addition to that, then the paper also covers our work on the wider borough and general emissions throughout the borough. And again, we don't have those most up-to-date figures. For that, we are reliant on government calculations. And again, that will be updated later in the year.
Brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Dunn. Anybody else? No? Oh, brilliant. Okay, so I'll move straight away into sort of question side of things. Of course, we can have a discussion with this as well. So the first question here is actually from me. So just with the time frame since we did climate emergency in 2019 to up to now, what has been achieved?
So a whole variety of things have been achieved. So for example, on retrofitting and decarbonising our buildings, we've retrofitted 29 of our corporate buildings, introducing things like air source heat pumps, solar panels, LED lighting. And in addition to that, we've worked with 32 schools, and we're doing more schools as well. We've provided money through the Community Energy Fund for community buildings to be able to decarbonise. And we've done some work on our social housing, both our council housing and also some belonging to council housing associations, although that is largely their responsibility, but where we can work together, we do. and we've got a lot more planned for that, and we have been successful in getting funding for that. We've successfully so far managed we're generating 17% of our own energy, and our target is 25% by 2026. We're looking to the future in terms of how we will be producing energy specifically to heat homes in the future. And so we're in the early stages of, we've produced a heat map, an energy master plan, and we'll be moving into the next stages of that feasibility studies. That for me is something really exciting. So if you know Mogden Sewage Works, I know it because I used to live on Mogden Lane, and it got a bit pungy at times, but that's something they're working on. But something that we're talking to Thames Water about is, because what comes out of Mogden Sewage Works isn't just smell, isn't just a bad smell, it isn't just the gases that they use to generate electricity currently, but it's a lot of waste heat. So can we utilize that heat? And that's what we're looking at the moment. So that's really exciting. In terms of the wider planning, we planning as a planning authority, we're introducing SPDs, supplementary planning documents. Sorry, I almost forgot that. So which will tell developers how they can meet our climate, their obligations, and also our aspirations as a borough. We are electrifying our vehicle fleets. We've introduced our street space program across the borough to try and encourage active travel. We're working with public transport, on the TfL, on the bus plan, to bring about better, cleaner buses. There's some exciting developments coming through on rail. You know, there's so much going on. There's the recycling developments there, which actually has a really big influence on climate change and carbon reduction. I know that's in a separate report. We're developing green skills for the borough, for our young people, through work in schools and our green skills boot camps. We're planting trees, and we're working on so we've got our electric vehicle charge point rollout, and just in general, so we've got our thinking of that wider piece. We're also working on a net zero neighbourhood investment model, which will bring in some of that additional funding that we don't have. We're not expecting to get from government, so we need to work with the private sector to bring that in to help to decarbonise our neighbourhoods.
That's great work. Thank you so much. In summary, 4 years worth.
I mean, I could go on, but you don't want me to.
But no, thank you for that. Councillor Tapp, please.
Thank you, Chair. I looked at the reports, the numbers. You did say that calculations have changed. So are the calculations mentioned for 2018-19 and 2021-22, are they based on same method or different methods?
Yeah, so they're based on the same method now. So it was just the original one in 2019 would have been based on different methods, but that's now been recalculated. So we're now using the same method every year.
Okay, so then my question is quite relevant. I looked at the numbers, and from 2018 to 21-22, in 4 years, we only managed to have a 2.5% reductions in our own emission. And our target is to get 50% reduction by 2026. Is this still attainable? Because in the last 4 years, we only achieved 2.5%.
Yeah, so we think it is attainable. So as I said, those figures are a year out of date now. So we'll be looking to see what comes out when we do our calculations for this year. And I am confident that it will show quite a big improvement in reductions. If you think about what I said there, started off with those 29 corporate buildings and 32 schools, you know, that didn't come into that. All that has happened since those calculations were made, or it was going on during that year. So the savings in carbon were not showing up in that figure of that gave us the 2.5% reduction. So there's an awful lot that's happened since then. There's an awful lot of plans for the next 3 years. That doesn't mean we're there yet, or that it's all in the bag. There is still, it's a very ambitious programme. There's a lot of uncertainty. and there are things that we still need to develop further in order to get to that 50%. And we'll be concentrating very strongly on our retrofitting our social housing, because that's where our biggest source of carbon emissions comes from as a council. We'll be looking at our procurement. That comes into those scope 3 emissions that I talked about. And I've forgotten the third main area, which is the renewable energy. And as I said, we're already at 17% of our 25% target on that.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dunn. Councillor Prezzato, please.
Thank you. So you have mentioned the possibility of lack of funding available for these programs. In the event of that actually happening and not being able to secure private sector partnerships, what are the areas that we will be prioritizing to continue achieving these goals?
So, I mean, we think we need to be lobbying government more, and we're working with other councils, specifically across London councils, but also across the UK, in order to lobby government for not just more funding, but like better programmed funding, so we know what we're going to get when and over a longer period, so that we're not constantly bidding for small pots of money. We don't want to be in competition with other councils all the time. Obviously, if we fail to win money through bidding and we fail to get it through other means, then there's a very real chance that we won't achieve our goals. But we have to, we have to keep pushing. We have to remain optimistic, and a lot of that private sector investment comes into like that will affect some of our social housing, but also what we want to come from that is for private homeowners and other and housing associations and whomever to benefit from that as well. So that would, if that doesn't come about, then that is the area that would suffer. That's going to be a problem not just for us, because if this model doesn't work for us, it won't work for other councils around the country as well. And so we're hoping very much that the government will see it as a national issue that they have to address. I don't know if you want to come in, Victoria.
Yeah. So it's obvious to say, isn't it? But this is a really significant challenge, and it's a societal one. So whilst we've got particular challenges in Hounslow, it is replicated right across the country and right across the globe about how do you actually get to net zero. So we've done an initial calculation. If we wanted to decarbonise all of Hounslow, it would cost in the region of 5.5 billion. The public purse doesn't have that. The private sector doesn't have that. But collectively, we have the opportunity to deal with that. We have been working at a number of different levels. So what we need to do locally, and Councillor Dunn's outlined some of the very significant funding that we've been able to bring in to the borough by retrofit, taking opportunities from government funding as and when it becomes available. But we've actually been working at a London level, so trying to bring a voice for Londoners through the Transport and Environment Committee at London Councils, the Chief Executive London Councils Committee, for which Niall is a part of, London Councils to GLA, along with other local government bodies up and down the country, LGA, Solace, key cities, core cities, to sit down and have conversations on behalf of the local government family to government and others to say, how do we address this? How do we simplify the funding? How do we move away from competitive bidding? Because it's not about who gets there first on net zero. It's about we all need to get there. So that's part of it. There's also work happening nationally around the 3CI model. So that's the Cities Climate Investment Commission. That is specifically there to try to connect public sector need projects with private sector investment. And this is some of the work that we've been looking at about how you create a net zero investment model. So it's not just about how you might change the fabric of a building or retrofit a building. It's how you look at a whole neighbourhood and you consider all of the different aspects that you need to get to net zero and consider climate adaptation, because we're going to face more challenging summers, winters, as we work towards 2030 and beyond. and we need to do the two things at the same time. So how do we deal with climate adaptation and the impact that will have? And how do we deal with getting the right investment into programs up and down the country? So, for example, 3CI have been able to put a national pipeline together of projects. It's about 62 billion. They're now trying to work out how we connect that to private sector finance. And they're the ones who are having very significant conversations with government on behalf of local government, for example.
Thank you for that, Victoria. Do you still want your follow-up call?
Yeah, just wanted the confirmation because the answer Councillor Dunn gave, what I got from it, that the target is still attainable, the 50% target. So just wanted.
We believe it is attainable.
So I'm sure we'll be calling you, or OSC will certainly call you later on anyway, and ask for updates. So I'm pretty sure we'll, or committee members will get those updates in due course. Okay, so Councillor Foot, do you want to ask your question, please?
It's a bit difficult. I'm sorry.
It was published a week ago.
It might have been, but it wasn't handed out to us until I arrived here today.
To look at it on your computer. Don't hand out documents. We're not supposed to hand out documents. That is part of our
That's news to me.
paper reduction. Everyone should look at them on their electronic devices.
Councillor Cameron, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, what measures are being taken to ensure that health and social care system will be resilient with the extra pressure they will come under due to the climate emergency? Thank you.
So that's a really good question. So we've been working with the North West London ICS. So they all have to produce what's called a green plan, very much like our climate emergency action plan. So that was led by or chaired by West Mid, and I was able to sit on that and help provide some of the learning from local government in North West London, because I chair the West London Environment Directors. So for them, they've got some very similar challenges to us around their estates, but some very different ones around medical supplies and things like that. So they're all required to produce that green plan, and that's been published. So that's one part of the work that we've been doing in terms of working with the NHS. But again, as I alluded to around seasonal planning, really aware about the impacts around more extreme changes in temperature and flooding. So I think when you look at our corporate plan as an organisation, there are things in there around how we get to 45% green infrastructure, how we improve our flood resilience. And again, some of these strategic approaches will help us deal with some of the wider issues we're going to face around health in particular. What we've also been working on is how you make that a just transition as we move forward, so that we're considering how we address some of the inequalities that are already faced in our borough by looking at doing things differently, whether that's through green skills and employment or other things, because actually you're right, Councillor, there's an extreme risk that as we move forward, if we don't tackle some of these challenges, we're just going to create further inequity in our borough, because it'll be those who can afford to make changes to their homes will probably see benefits than those don't. That's why the sort of the net zero neighbourhood investment model is so important to us, because then we can do it for everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Bidoff, please.
Thank you. You mentioned planning. I'm rather more exercised by construction and what we can do to influence people who come to build here, that they should be using more sustainable materials and certainly less damaging materials than is being used at the moment. A lot of plastic in construction materials, for example, we don't want to end up in landfill, as it were. All of that stuff, when it comes down after the end of its life, ends up as a problem. I don't think we look at things like, well, do we look at things like what the windows are made of? I know with domestic applications, we're still saying yes to UPVC. UPVC solves the problem today, but gives us a problem tomorrow when it has to be pulled out and replaced. It has a very short shelf life compared with older materials such as wood or even metal. What are we doing, for example, to ban fake grass? can we ban fake grass? Because it does nobody any good at all and ends up as a problem. And things like paving over front gardens. I know some of these things are smaller issues, but collectively they add up to an awful lot more. So the question generally is, what are we doing to influence others? I'm particularly concerned about construction and building materials and things to do with our local homes.
I'll start off and let you come in. Thanks, Councillor Biddulph. Yes, so in terms of materials, I mean, some of that will come into planning. So we've got 2 of these SPDs coming to Cabinet this month. So there's the climate change adaptation and mitigation, which is more about the energy that buildings use and so on, and mitigations and adaptations for climate change. The character and design and character sustainability and design SPD obviously has that sustainability in there. So that does look at building materials and making sure that that they are as sustainable as possible. These can't introduce new policies. So the SPDs can only set out how developers can meet obligations under our current policies. I should say obligations and aspirations, because we do also set out in those how they can go beyond what is required of them, and we would encourage them to do that. But as well as that, we are having a look again, a refresh and review of the local plan, and so that we can bring that up to date and bring in more of these policies into that.
There's also, so whilst the SPDs don't allow us to set policy, it does set out that technical guidance that we expect all developers to follow, particularly around climate change adaptation, mitigation, and our design codes. But there is a policy within the London plan that for all major applications, there needs to be a circular economy method statement. So in terms of the construction material used during development, that all needs to be laid out by the developer and needs to be signed off by the GLA before it's progressed forward. That is an area that we are continually pushing developers to do, regardless of the policy, because we feel like it's an area that needs to be addressed. We do have, we're currently in the process of developing the Nature Recovery Action Plan, which looks at how we can connect all of our nature recovery sites across the borough. And that's not just strategic parks and open spaces, but it's also the back gardens, the allotments, and we are developing a campaign, hopefully, that will push forward that whole Save It and Pave It work around, like you mentioned, fake grass. So we can encourage residents to save their front gardens as well.
So it sounds, sorry, Chairman, can I just have a follow-up? It sounds as if the GLA needs to be pushed harder than perhaps is happening at the moment. I still remember the Ballymore building in Brentford, where we didn't take the opportunity to say to them, it wasn't built, it wasn't started. It would have to have just been redrawn. Don't put in gas, please put in electric. And that went ahead with electric. 6 months later, we would be telling them to retrofit. And what I'm a bit worried about with this is that we're giving guidelines that in 6 months' time we're going to be saying aren't guidelines. You've got to follow this or you can't build here. Shouldn't we be ahead of our curve, as it were, rather than just pushing it?
So I don't think we can't insist on things if that's going ahead of the law. So for the Ballymore thing, for example, we did talk to them and we did try to encourage them. So when the planning permission was granted, that was some years ago, and that's why it had gas in there. Obviously, in terms of our own block that we developed in there for council housing, that is not using gas. We did talk to Ballymore to try and encourage them onto something different, but we couldn't force that because they had the planning permission.
No, I remember that. It's more that 6 months later, or perhaps a bit longer than that, we were saying to them, you've got to retrofit. The mood was to retrofit if we weren't saying them. And I just sense here that everybody wants to take faster action than authorities and perhaps the government as well are allowing. And can we not push harder? Because at the moment we're doing some schemes which actually have a minimal impact on a global issue. And we should be doing far more bigger schemes which have a bigger impact on a global issue.
So we are pushing as hard as we can, and we'll continue to do that. But for some of those things, it will need the law to catch up. We can only insist on what's within the law. We can push and persuade and negotiate and barter to get beyond that.
Councillor Kiani, please.
Thank you, Chair. What is the council doing to promote climate education or diversifying the labour market and moving into more sustainable sector?
Thanks, Councillor Kiani. So sort of two things there, I think. So one about climate education, and that has to start really young and start in schools. And we are doing a lot with schools. So we have our Eco Schools programme, which talks to young people in schools and encourages them to do climate and environmental projects within their schools. That we talk to them about recycling and so on, and what they can do to help their schools recycle more. In terms of travel, we have the STARS programme, which encourages active and sustainable travel to and from school. We've done anti-idling campaigns outside schools and so on. So we're really trying to instill that at a young age. And actually that's pushing an open door, because young people and children are very open to this. They understand that it is their future, and they want to preserve the planet. So it's there for them as they grow up and then have children of their own. In terms of diversifying the labour market, we have to do that, because if we don't, we won't have the people to do the retrofitting work, to do the energy centres that we need, and install the solar panels and all these things. So we're working. We piloted some a green skills boot camp, which was working with people of all ages actually who weren't in work and wanted to reskill and get skills in a particular sector. And that was the first one, was very much around conservation, I think, but we want to move into other areas as well, if I'm right, and some of that more technological space as well, to make sure that we have got people in order to do the work that needs to be done, and also that people living here in Hounslow benefit from those new jobs when they do come along.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dunn. Something that's just sort of I've thought about is that we're doing a lot, and that's fantastic. It's really, really good right across. Now, with some of the work that's being done with that, is there any, I don't want to say sort of quick wins or fixes? For instance, retrofitting housing, how much carbon would that save? And would that be maybe an area that we look into in a form of making that urgent first, and then do other bits and pieces, or maybe prioritizing it?
Yes, I think so. Just to answer that, so Councillor Dunn sort of alluded to three areas. So the social housing stock is about 39% of our council carbon footprint, and we do want to accelerate that as fast as we possibly can. But then we come up against the challenge of how do we fund and finance that? So there are big funding streams that we can access through government, and we have been doing that. And you'll see some examples of that in the paper. But if we want to go deeper and faster, there's work that we're looking to do that across London. So the housing directors for London have got a big retrofit London programme that they're trying to push to provide a holistic voice for London. But then it comes back to how do we create, say, net zero neighbourhoods, the way we can create an investment model that will enable us to do it all. Because if we just follow technological domain funding, we'll be able to do so much. But what we really want to do is take a much more holistic system-based approach to that, to try to get us there more quickly, because we're very conscious about how quickly we do need to move on this. And there's no, I really wish there was a simple fix. I would have taken it if I could, Councillor.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
I mean, obviously the good thing about all of it, the bad thing, if it were, is how much there is to do and how much it's going to cost. The good thing about it is when we do these things, we see other benefits as well. It's not just that we're reducing our carbon footprint, it's that we are improving our neighbourhoods, we're improving people's homes, we're reducing their energy bills, we're creating better environments, more healthy environments. So it's got all these additional benefits as well. So if we can figure out the mechanism, get the funding, and get going with it, it's a no-brainer in all those regards.
No, that's brilliant. No, that's great. So, is there any? Yeah. Okay. So, Councillor Parisotto, please.
Thank you. Oh, I'm curious about whether there are some specific challenges that are just here in Hounslow. We are near Heathrow, and how those are being addressed.
So Heathrow does provide challenges for us. I mean, obviously other airport communities will have similar ones, but the particular positioning of Hounslow next to Heathrow, underneath flight paths and so on, does provide challenges for us. I mean, one of the biggest challenges is actually all the transport and traffic that it takes to go to Heathrow, both in terms of people going to go on holiday and on their business trips, but also in terms of all the people that Heathrow employ who need to travel to the airport. And there is some public transport, but it's not great at the moment, and a lot of people are having to drive there. And so, I mean, we do engage with Heathrow. So I sit on Keisha, which is Council for the Independent Scrutiny of Heathrow Airport. And the borough is also a part of the Heathrow Strategic Planning Group, which means that's where we work with other boroughs and other airport communities so that we can have a coordinated approach to our engagement with Heathrow. And so on transport planning, for example, we're encouraging them and to do things like improving public transport access to Heathrow. I mean, rail access is one of those things. So we're very much involved in discussion around Southern Rail access to Heathrow, which will not only benefit Heathrow workers, but will also benefit many people in our communities living in Feltham and around by increasing their connectivities as well. Heathrow has been working for a long time. Hopefully it's getting going again on opening up a cycling route, because at the moment you can't cycle into Heathrow. You can't get through the perimeter fence, but there's talk they are building a tunnel that will take people in. So there's sort of slow improvements there. Obviously aviation itself is a massive carbon emitter, and there are strategies and things for that. How soon and how successful that will be, I can't comment on, and that's something we probably have less influence over. But obviously, we do lobby government and think on these things as well.
Councillor Biddulph, please.
Thank you. The King went and did something yesterday with the airline industry and increasing electrifying there. So that's something you might like to look at and encourage more of. I just wanted to pick up, and it's a relatively small point, on your save rather than pave, save not pave scheme. I worry that things like that are going to be taken up by people who are already converted. And it's those people who aren't so interested, who might already have paved and or be thinking of paving, who won't be persuaded at all. And I don't want to single out or demonize people who have HMOs, with HMOs are very useful. But if you are the landlord of a property with a front and a back garden, as quite a lot of our houses in our borough are, and you're going to have tenants who are there for a few months and then off, and nobody's necessarily going to want to grow anything or be interested in watering it or mowing it or weeding it, how are we going to persuade them that they should be behaving differently and not paving over or unpaving their gardens?
So that's a really good question, Councillor Biddulph, and I think it plays into a much bigger question about how do we get our communities collectively to change some of their behaviours. And whilst climate is definitely going up people's agenda in terms of importance, there are still, I think, choices that people prefer to make. That's an example of one. Flying on holiday is another. And I think there is something that we need to do, not just in Hounslow, but more broadly. But how do we get people to understand that there's going to have to be some give and take? And it's not just about loss, it might be different. And so that whole behaviour change, though, I don't think anybody has quite cracked that yet. But there are definitely examples of it across the globe where they've been able to make some quite significant changes. And I think it's definitely a piece of work that's in our climate emergency action plan about how do we change community and individuals' behaviours, because actually it's going to be probably one of the toughest things that we will have to do. So any ideas? I think this is where yourselves as councillors can come in about helping us give that message, and we can use other tools around like regulation, like you say, Councillor Bidoff, around how we can make things more challenging to do things in a particular way. But yeah, there's a long way to go on behaviour change.
Thank you for that. I mean, so just, I mean, that's sort of it coming to sort of time with questions, but ever so quickly, is there any other sort of discussion, any question, any thoughts, maybe an alternative, something we should be doing to help the climate emergency from committee members? I mean, this is really just me out in the blue. I mean, is it possible to have wind farms? Do we have any land?
Wind farms in Hounslow, most probably not, just because they are more suitable on coastal areas. But we have
Sorry, also solar farms as well. Yeah.
oh, solar farms. Oh, okay. But I was going to go on to say we have quite a bit of roof space that the council owns. And we are currently looking at what capacity is available to allow us to roll out solar PV across our rooftops. And so we can not only achieve that 25% self-generation target, but go above and beyond that. Yeah, so there's plenty of scope for solar PV.
Thank you for that.
There is a wind generator that I pass regularly. Is it Sky? So they're generating, presumably using that for their own energy source, are they?
They are, but it only benefits the Sky development.
Yes.
Yes.
But rather than a wind farm, maybe we could encourage larger businesses, if that's the most useful place for them to be, to put something in that helps them reduce their use of other resources. So it wouldn't be a farm, it would be a scattering.
Yes, and just on that as well. So West London Alliance are bringing some of the big businesses together to, and have been doing so, to talk about the challenge to get to net zero for businesses. So I can ask for an update on that if the Scrutiny Committee are interested to see where their thinking is on some of that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much, Victoria. Yeah, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question, it's just a comment. Previously, I requested twice to Councillor Dunn regarding the council installs the solar panels on different sites. So I request her twice, can you please share the list of the sites where the council installed the solar panels? Thank you.
Yeah, we'll make sure we do that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so just because of time permitting, I'm going to sort of wrap this up. Thank you so much to all of you, Councillor Dunn, Ajit and Victoria, for that update. It's absolutely fantastic. It's fascinating stuff. It's great stuff. Councillor Foote, if I can ask you to just close this off for me, please.
Yeah. Note the progress made to date in reducing the council and the borough's carbon footprint since declaring a climate emergency in June 2019. Note the progress made on projects that have been developed and implemented to date on reducing the council's and the wider borough's impact on the climate emergency, and propose additional projects that will be considered and assessed that will enable targets to be achieved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Foote. And that is it really for the item. So again, thank you all for being here. More than happy to sort of stay, or if you wish to go, you can of course go. Thank you.
We're having a little break. So I have an emergency break. need to go.
Yeah, all right. No, yeah, 2 minutes. Yeah.
I'm not used to sitting down, sitting at a desk. And I feel
Thank you all. I hope everyone had a little refresher here. So hopefully we'll move on to agenda item number 5. This is Hounslow Recycles. This is for information only, and it's just a brief outline. So during work programming, the committee were keen to see what has happened on this popular issue. To that end, members will note the report provided as for information item by Councillor Lambert, Cabinet Member for Highways Recycling Companies. Now, we are joined by Guy Lambert, Councillor Lambert. I'm more than happy for you to talk for a couple of minutes, or if you're happy with moving on.
I'll say a few words. Just
Thank you.
Just to make my journey worthwhile. There are 3 or 4 different aspects of this. The first one is to do with the improvement in the recycling rate. When I started, it was below 30%. I can't remember exactly what, and it's now the last numbers that we got are at 37. And this at a time where recycling in general in the country has gone down. So we've done very well against the trend there. It's still not fantastic, it's pretty good for a borough like ours, where we don't have massive gardens, which helps Richmond and Kingston to get fantastic recycling rates because they have a lot of hedges. So the other thing is we've been working very hard to improve the service. The service is very good. The collection rate of containers is very high, one of the best in the country, and we've been busily innovating in various ways, and in particular on our top priority, which is food waste. We believe that about 60% of food waste still goes into black bins, and that is awful. It's really stupid. It costs us a lot of money, and we're working very hard to improve that. And tomorrow, I've actually got an invite to the Dorchester because we've been shortlisted for innovation in food waste. So we're hoping that we beat the shortlist. The other thing from recycling is one of the things that the way that we do recycling is it's very high quality. We get very good money for it, and last year we had by considerable margin a record in terms of income. I think we got about 1.5 million back from recyclers buying stuff off us. And the other thing that's well, it's a couple of other things mentioned here. One is what's coming out of the 2021 Environment Act, of which the most notable one is the producer of mess pays for the polluter pays. So that is coming slowly because the government have been slow in putting this. Actually, it's law, but it has not actually been put into it to enforce. The first thing it will go into enforce is it'll start next year, and that's basically that some of the cost of dealing with waste is moved from us as councillors and as residents onto the people who produce the waste, i.e. manufacturers and retailers. But it's still not really clear how that's going to work. And equally, the other thing that is being brought in is money back on your bottles if you take them back to Morrison's. And they haven't really announced that. They've announced that they want to do it, but we don't understand how that's going to work. Sorry? Yeah, so I'm getting ready to be walking around with a little barrow. The final thing that I wanted to talk about on here is fly tipping. Fly tipping has been a huge priority for me. And we've put a lot of effort into education, into enforcement, and into facilities to help people to not fly tip. And we're really delighted to say that when we were putting the manifesto together last year, we said we'll try and get a 25 reduction. Well, in the first year, we've had a 23% reduction. That was the early thing. It's somewhere between 20 and 23%. So very pleased about that. Still lots to do, and still a lot of effort going into it. I hate fly tipping. I don't want any, but if we get it around by 25 or 50%, then I'll be a happy man.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that update, Councillor. Okay, so it's just for information only, but thank you for that. I will now sort of move on to agenda item number 6, as time is now permitting. So updates from scrutiny panels and the North West London Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Each year, the scrutiny panels conduct deep dives into agreed topics and set out their findings and recommendations. The panel are concluding the deep dives. Your agenda packs, including these reports. OSC is asked to note these findings and recommendations. I'll ask each panel chair to report back to the committee on their work this year. If I can ask Councillor Parisotto first, please.
Hello, thank you very much. So yes, my panel is the Children and Young People Scrutiny Panel, and this year we have looked at how the local authority is supporting our children in care that have an immigration status, especially those that are unaccompanied asylum seeker from an unaccompanied asylum seeking background. We've had our 4 standard meetings, but we've also had external extra meetings, including with Wrexham Council, as they've been marked as very good by the Independent Monitoring Authority, so we could learn from them. We've also had meetings with the charities that have been supporting children, both in the hotels and in our care, to learn English and to be provided with extra activities. So those were really, really positive. And we've had 8 recommendations to Councillor Bath, and including for us to create a more formalized approach to how we track the status that a child enters our care with to how they leave our care, so that we are ensuring that they leave our care with the most secure immigration status possible. We've also, of course, had to make recommendations externally to the Home Office, and we acknowledge that those are already generally done by our leadership and by officers. But generally, we urge the Home Office to give us more notice about when children or families generally are moving into contracted hotels in our area, and the funding that comes with it. Because, of course, one thing that came from our panel investigation is that there is an added pressure, and we want to continue looking after every child that comes into our care. But, of course, with that comes the need for extra beds, the need for extra education places, and for social workers as well. And on the 26th of April, I met with Councillor Bath, and the recommendations were broadly accepted, and we're now waiting for a formal written response as the team is assessing where the recommendations can be made, what adaptations have to be made to the service, which I will share when appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Perisotto, and Councillor Sharma, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this municipal year, the Health and Adult Care Scrutiny Panel looked at dementia in the borough. The panel was interested in the care and support for people with dementia in the community. Alongside hearing evidence at the meetings from services and carers, a smaller group of members visited Age UK, Dementia CAFs and Singing for the Brain. Panel members also met with a social worker, GP, and palliative care consultants working with people living with dementia, which is all in your pack. The deep dive investigated the referral systems for people diagnosed with dementia to support in the community, the support available for people with dementia, their families and communities, examples of good practice to support people with dementia and their families, the experience of people with dementia, their carers in the referral pathways, and support from the services. So we had our 4 meetings, but we also engaged in 10 additional meetings to do this deep dive. The panel made the following recommendations. 1, referral systems, that the borough-based partnerships work with services to ensure adequate post-diagnosis referrals are made into clinical and community pathways. A coordination of services, that the borough-based partnership consider ways to communicate and coordinate work between dementia care services. End-of-life planning, that the borough-based partnerships work with SIDS, GPs and care providers to encourage timely end-of-life or end of advanced care planning, perhaps in its digital form, to enable earlier conversations about final wishes, power of attorney and healthcare at the end of life. dementia support services in the community, that the Dementia Care Alliance and the borough-based partnership reviews and assures itself that services are sufficient and effective to keep up with community needs. Additional non-social care support for people living alone, that the London Borough of Hounslow consider how the floating support services, the VCSE befriending or side-by-side initiatives might help people living alone with dementia to deal with correspondence and make their medical appointments. The sixth recommendation was the care support and respite, that London Borough of Hounslow takes forward the outputs from the carers listening sessions into changes into care support options. 7 is communication, that the borough-based partnership review and consider people living with dementia and their carers access to timely and useful information. And the 8th recommendation was the Dementia Action Alliance and London Borough of Hounslow work to encourage all organisations to implement dementia-friendly training. This should be supported by a public information campaign. On Wednesday, the 26th of April, I represented the Health and Adult Care Scrutiny Panel at a meeting with Councillor Chowdhury, Cabinet Member for Adults and Health Integration, Adult Social Care Services. I shared the panel's engagement activities, findings and 8 recommendations on the Dementia Deep Dive. Councillor Chowdhury welcomed the recommendations and thanked the Health and Adult Care Scrutiny Panel for their work. The 8 recommendations were broadly accepted by her, and she will engage with system partners to provide a response to the panel in the new municipal year. As chair of the Health and Adult Care Scrutiny Panel, I'd like to thank the officers and our guests and also our panel members for their contribution to this year's work. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Kiani for your report.
Chair. I also, for the joint health overview and scrutiny, there were no further meetings. We've already updated in our last OSC meeting.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I would like to suspend the standing orders, please. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Kiani.
Thank you, Chair. And this year, in this municipal year, housing repair and customer satisfaction, we did a deep dive in this. What we investigated 3 areas of, we did the investigation in that. First is operating contexts, performance and processes, both within the council and Qualo, customer services, customer journeys, and customer satisfaction, and Qualo's customer base capacity and capacity building. The panel invited a range of guests from LBH Hounslow function, from the council's customer services department, and a number of senior members of the Qualo and Lambton 360 organization to its December's meeting. In March, the panel honed the recommendation and requested additional data from both Qualo and the council. The panel later finalized the recommendation in the April meeting. We did share the recommendation with lead member, Councillor Sue Sampson, and we will have a formal meeting with her after this OSC meeting to formalize that. The panel agreed on the following recommendation after investigating the relationship between the council and Qualo, including scrutiny of data and information on performance, the customer journeys, and the work carried out as part of the repair system. Throughout the panel investigation, the panel was struck with seeming contradiction with their first-hand engagement with residents, high level of customer satisfaction from Qualo Customer Services Survey, alongside high level of frustration from residents. The panel felt that there was a lot of performance data available to both the council and the Qualo, but the excess of data make a focus on the key issue difficult. There was a need to consider what LBH as a commissioner of services and Qualo as a provider focused on. The recommendations are, we did the 5 recommendations, and they are, the council needs to ensure it understands and have oversight of the process and performance of contractors by giving LBH access to repairs raised and their progress. The second one, LBH should regularly ask the representative sample of residents about their satisfaction with their overall experience of the end-to-end repairs and maintenance process. Recommendation 3, LBH and Qualo should carry out a review of the current numbers, KPIs, so as to understand performance better. These performance measures should be relevant both to the work required and the customer experience of the services. Recommendation 4, For both the council and Kuala, the customer satisfaction process needs to be focused more on time between first contact and teams arriving as much as satisfaction with the job being completed. And number fifth recommendation, fifth recommendation, informed by the performance data, both the council and needs to focus on voids, carrying out an urgent review of the issue, better understand the problem, and then developing an action plan to voids in a timely fashion. As the chair of the Housing Panel, I take this opportunity to thank members of the Housing and Environment Scrutiny Panel, Councillor Boring, the chair, vice chair, Councillor Sharma, Councillor Parisotto, Councillor Emelsley, Councillor Siddiqui, Councillor Asim, and Councillor Amir. And I would like to thank officers, Zubaira Raja, Paul Roberts, for their help in to achieve this 5 recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think Sue wants to come in here and just say something.
Yes, I do. I just want to reassure, we've had a very good working relationship this past year with Councillor Kiani and the committee, and I've had an open invitation to the meetings, and I've attended where I can if it didn't coincide with cabinet meetings. But I absolutely accept all the recommendations here. I also accept all the recommendations from the past overview and scrutiny committee. We are currently working, I just want to reassure you, we are currently working through the management agreement between ourselves and Lambton, Koala, was Koala, it's now Lambton. We are currently working, we have a year in order to thrash through that. Because if you cast your mind back, the original agreement was written in 2015 and we are now in 23 and it's not fit for purpose, cost-wise and expectation-wise and a lot of other issues. So we've given ourselves a year to do that and we are on target to achieve that. So I have taken on board all the recommendations and they will be looked at as we go along with that process. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Councillor Sampson. Well, there you go. You don't need a meeting anymore.
To say thank you to Councillor Sue Sampson and my panel is.
I just ask where the year started from, because I know you started before panel reported, obviously. When does the year for Lambton to be?
Oh, from February. Yeah, it was from going back to February when we approved the Borough Council approved the 300 million asset management programme. The management agreement at that point was we've only awarded them the year's contract because we're not awarding, because that was a 5-year spend, but we've only awarded a year contract in order to allow us the time in order to sort all the issues out. And we're pretty confident we will. There's issues on both sides. It's not on any one side. And we're being realistic. And now relationships now are forming, building, and we're in a better place now than I could say we were this time last year. So I'm very confident that we will get there.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so just sort of wrapping up, I'd like to thank the chairs on the panel for their hard work this year. I recognise the deep dive process draws on a range of organisations and individuals, and it's clear to see that recommendations have benefited from extensive engagement with officers, experts and voluntary sectors, and of course, councillors as well and cabinet members. So it's really good. None of the deep dives tackle easy sort of issues, and I look forward to seeing how some of this element of scrutiny policy develops, role bearing, fruititious, I'm sure within the coming months and years. Should committee members want to understand more, I'm sure Councillors Kiani, Parazotto and Sharma will be more than happy to provide any details outside of this meeting, emails, etc. as well. So that comes to the end of agenda item number 6. So thank you again. Thank you. I can only thank you all. So we come to agenda item number 7. This is the draft annual overview and scrutiny report. So, members will have received separate from the agenda a draft of the committee's annual report. This will be taken to Borough Council early in the new municipal year. The annual report should set out what the committee and its panels have achieved over the year. We now have some time to comment on draft circulated. But anyone want to talk about it? Councillor Bidoff.
Thank you. I think the sway, or whatever it's called, works really well for the panels. And I think the reports on the panels are extremely well put together. But it makes the main committee look as if it hasn't done anything. And so we need to work on the section that is to do with the full committee. I think we need to be more transparent about things that happened, and that, you know, a new thing occurred, such as a pre-scrutiny before it goes to cabinet, which has not served residents well, and there's been controversy about that. But this, you know, the first meeting you open, the first page you open on for the main committee is that we met to decide our work programme. That's admin. That isn't a sense of achievement at all. I think we need something on each of the subjects that we have raised.
So this is a draft, and I'm sure we'll, you know, add to it and whatever we need to sort of add before the borough meeting. But I'll take your points, Councillor. But yes,
they
it is a
link to
draft.
they link to the recording on YouTube, which is fine. But that's quite a lazy way of saying this is what we did. You've got to listen to 2.5 hours to work it out each time. So I think we need better summaries.
I'll build on that. Thank you. Any other suggestions with the draft annual report? I mean, personally, I think we've done really well. So I do appreciate that. This panel's done their sort of deep dives, and we've sort of taken a broader range of what OSC does right across all different type policies. Of course, deep dives do the deeper dives. And yes, I do appreciate that. Maybe we could sort of add a few more sort of bits and pieces to the report.
I think it's more than bits
But
and
we've
pieces,
done
Chair.
we've done sort of you know six meetings with a huge amount of substantive items on all those meetings. So I get your point. We need to break it up a little bit more and go a little bit more detailed, and I'm sure we'll do that. Again, this is a draft annual meeting. I'm more than happy to discuss this outside when this meeting finishes. Councillor Tuck.
In past, the annual report, in the annual report, what we have included is the items we discussed and the recommendations we made to the cabinet, and how many recommendations were accepted. That's essentially shows the achievement of the scrutiny committee. And that's what I need is missing from this draft report. Yes, we have the panel, scrutiny panel reports, and those are really good. But as a committee, the whole committee, what we recommended to the cabinet and what they adopted from the committee recommendation, that's what shows the achievement of the committee. And in past, we have had that in the committee reports. So I would appreciate if
I'm sure it will come to Borough Council, but Councillor Sampson, please.
No, I absolutely agree with Councillor Tack. I think there needs to be, because you're giving us the recommendations and we should feedback maybe annually, like you're giving us recommendations now. I'll talk for myself, so I'm going to feed that into how our new management plan and how we're going to take that forward. But then that you need to see how that's been, you know, your recommendations have played out. So I think that's a very valid point.
And thank you, Councillor Sampson. And like I said, we'll get that out. We've taken a point, so points have been noted, and we'll get that out when more updated, and of course the recommendations included as well. But thank you for that. Thank you for that. Anything else from the committee members? Okay. Well, okay, so we move on to agenda item number 8, which is any urgent business. I don't have anything. And then the next item is agenda item number 9. Now, this is the date of the next meeting of 19th of June 2023. And with that, the last meeting of the OSC draws to a close. I would like to thank everybody contributing to tonight's Overviewing Scrutiny Committee and the wider contributions to scrutiny over the course of 2022-2023. I'd like to just thank all the committee members here, everyone that's sitting here. It's invaluable. You all are. It really is. So thank you so much for your contributions throughout this year, and all the officers, of course, who have helped out as well. And of course, all of Cabinet as well, and Leader for being in these meetings as well. So thank you all throughout this entire year. It's really an eye-opener. So thank you. And to that, we draw the meeting to an end. Thank you.
Can I just say thank you on behalf of us to the chair and vice chair?
And to the officers as well.
Oh, thank you.